And now the world knows that you've been told to come in a suit and a tie, but you
didn't read the memo.
You didn't. Who, me?
Yes.
Yeah, apparently I am the one who didn't read the memo. But next time tell me in advance, gentlemen, and then we'll see what we'll do about that. That's the voice of one Dr. Martins Oloo. Good morning. At 9 minutes after 7 o'clock, this is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, and we're getting into another conversation necessary for us to have this morning. Our live streams are up on YouTube, on X, and on Facebook, and our audience on KTN around Kenya and the region and the Situation Room to the world. Karibu sana as we get into things this morning. Right, so he's here. Karibu Wakili.
Asante, thank you for having me.
You're well?
Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you so much for always honoring our invitation to discuss things that matter. Yes. We're going to get into something today. It's already controversial. And already people are up in arms asking questions. And so we'll get from the legal point of view and then what it could mean from a social justice perspective as well. Also then taking in what, parliamentary discussions could be about that moving forward. But before we do, how about you let us know your interpretation of a proverb that Dennis will share from Burundi?
Burundi, a landlocked country in East Africa bordered by Rwanda to the north, Tanzania east and south, and the Democratic Republic of Congo to the west. Lake Tanganyika, one of the world's deepest and longest freshwater lakes from the parts of Burundi's southwest. But one thing that Burundi are internationally well known for is for their drums. There's a way they just beat that drum, and it's humongous. One even wonders how they manage to balance it on their heads, but it is one thing that they're known for, and it's appreciated across the world. Now, our proverb today that comes from Burundi: when the drum sounds, it's not for one person. How would you interpret that?
You don't know how to keep secrets, because you should have suspected that I had that discussion. But here is the issue. In Swahili, they say, mbiu ya mgambo ikilia, kuna jambo.
Yes.
In other words, the moment an announcement or something that is of common nature happens, it is meant to alert everyone that there's an issue. So we woke up this morning to tell people that here is our lineup for the day. So what then people are supposed to do is to tune in or to prepare themselves to question or to even raise issues. So whenever a drum is beaten, those who must come to dance must dance, and those who must hearken must hearken, and those who are away must find time to come and join others. So it's really an invitation to all to come, depending on where they sit.
Yes.
Indeed. Well, come, it's beating, so you then decide what it is that you're going to do when you hear it. Yeah. I'm reminded of the talking drums from southwest Nigeria. When the drum starts to beat, people just find they come out. And so then you ask yourself, okay, so what then does it mean and what am I supposed to do? All right, so we're looking into a conversation this hour about the controversial demonstration bill, a step toward order and attack on freedoms. And let's just look at that. A little bit of a background to it is that there is a mover of the bill in Parliament, which for what we see right now is Esther Passaris, whereby she's in this bill. What we've heard is that they are trying to say that it should be put into law that certain parts of cities or towns should be restricted from protest. Not that you should not protest, but that certain parts should be restricted. In addition to that, we're seeing other things coming out whereby that there should be a fine or a jail term of a year or 100,000 shillings should you be found to be guilty as one who led drama during demonstrations or protests or paid for it or things like this. And we saw that the president has thrown his weight behind that kind of conversation. And so we start to ask questions that this didn't start after June 25th, 2025, that we saw previously that the current cabinet secretary for Mbeere North, the current cabinet secretary for public service, who was formerly the Mbeere North MP, actually moved this before. And he said, you know what, we should not be having this at all. People who come up with these protests and these demonstrations should actually be fined or jailed that didn't see the light of day because members of parliament rejected it at the time. But then now this has found its way back into the plenary for discussions. An overview of what you understand this bill to be, Doc, and then where could we be heading?
I'm so glad that we can have this conversation at a time like this, and particularly to know that the people who are, or the person who is behind the push to amend this bill is Esther Passaris, who is an ODM MP. In the past, it was Ruku, the UDA MP then. The new sycophants in town are now the ODM members of parliament. You heard what TJ Kajwang was saying, what Kaluma says. They have stopped thinking, and they have stopped even imagining that when you make a law, make it so that even when your enemy is in power, you will be safe. The other day, they were on the other side receiving the weight of this government. Today, they are in this government making statements that would appear that oppression, suppression, and draconian rule is okay. Now, it's okay when you are in. What about when you are out? So let us always be careful that whenever you make a law, it should be that even when your enemy is in power, you should feel safe. Now, the point that I want to push is every time you look at a law or look at a proposal of a law, there is something that you want to understand. What is the mischief? What is the intention of the framers of that law? It's obvious that this government, as indeed it began right from the word go, has this feeling that it needs more laws, it needs more force, it needs more power to rule. Nothing could be further from the truth. They already have a constitution, they already have enabled or aware Kenyans who are fairly aware and therefore conscious. And people who are conscious and people who are aware and people who know the rule of law and who have already a constitution that's enabling them do not need more repression, oppression, or even repressive laws. So you are solving a social issue, an economic issue, through the brutal force of the law or an attempt to bring a law that disrupts people's lives. So my sense is that demonstrations and picketing, as anticipated in Article 37 of the Constitution, actually does not stop somewhere. It means that if I want to talk or to picket against Ndu, the best place for me to picket is by their gate, where they will hear and they will know and they will believe. So if you want to picket against government, the best place to go to is Harambee House. You want to picket against parliament, the best place to go to is parliament. You want to picket against the president, you can go to Harambee House or near the State House. So how can you make it impossible for anybody to communicate, to pass a message, to even pass a memo or to pass whatever they want to let the president know? How do you make it impossible for them to even make it close to it?
So are you saying that then such a bill, or what we're seeing that it's being recommended in this bill, goes against the freedoms that are guaranteed under the Constitution?
Absolutely. And they are totally unnecessary, because whatever the government is trying to do, or whatever Passaris is trying to do, or parliament, or whatever they do, it's totally unnecessary. Let me ask you, how do you stop owners of a place from visiting their home? You know who owns State House? It's not the government. It's not the president. It's Kenyans. It's their house. How do you stop them from nearing there to speak? I mean, if I stopped my children from coming home to protest or to raise issues with me, where else do I expect them to be? So basically what we are saying is that we cannot be afraid of ourselves. We cannot be afraid of the owners of this country. We cannot, ostracize or even alienate citizens who are the bosses of this country from picketing and demonstrating and communicating to their leaders.
But what would the fear be? Because it seems that, and I think you're not the first one to say it, but it's been said over time that there's fear that is being presented here, that's being manifested, and that's why we see this kind of stuff. What's the fear of?
You see, the fear is simple. We don't want accountability. Why do you think MPs decided to build a tunnel so that they can behave like moles from this other side to the offices? They walk under the tunnel. They fear accountability. They want to be elected by people, but don't want to be accountable to people. Don't want to be seen by people. Which representative in this world will ever want to live in a tunnel where there are no voters and avoid outside to meet the voters? So it's only in Kenya where you want to do it. Which government that is elected by people would want to insulate itself from the people? In fact, if you told these people to move parliament to an island or to move the state house to an island, they would do that so that they can rule from there and leave the rest of us languishing down here. So for me, it's fear of accountability. And you know what are they running from? They are running from being questioned. And they are running from being tested. You're running clips this morning where you can see somebody said this yesterday. They are saying that yesterday. In other words, we do not seem to be predictable. If we say we don't like this thing, it's because it's not, we are not benefiting from it. The moment we start benefiting, we say it's okay. So with that kind of attitude, then we are seeing what we are seeing. And by the way, what is it they're running from? They're running away from themselves. They're running away from their children. Remember, this generation is not going to go away. We are in a multi-generational society. And these Gen Zs that we have are rightfully here, and they are questioning, and they are different, and they're operating from outside the known stereotyping. So let's face it.
You know, the imagery that comes to my mind is when you watch the drug cartels movies and you have tunnels.
Yes.
The imagery is, in the event they come for me, I will just flip the bathtub, get into the hole, disappear through the tunnel into another territory. That's the imagery that's coming to me. You are running away from something. But could I also be correct? My reading of this, because you earlier said that all this is unnecessary. Could my reading be wrong? When you look at the phrase, the last kicks of a dying horse are the most powerful, you're looking at a situation where a wounded horse or a dying horse will lash out so desperately and just before it dies. And you look at a track record of governments in the past when they sense that they're on the verge of either collapse or a final effort, or they're going to get out, their final effort will always be to do something that looks very sudden, something that looks very loud, or even brutal. Could I be correct with my reading of this? Because the movers of this motion, clearly, you can tell when you're pushing this, it's almost, you know, you're not coming back. So your last effort is push as much as you can, make it as brutal as you can, because after all, you're not coming back.
And that's the tragedy. Where are they going? They are going to be in this country. Will demonstrations continue to happen? Yes, they will happen. Will it affect them? Yes. Next time, they have said do not demonstrate around the State House. Fine. But they are building private houses wherever they are building them. Will they stop Kenyans from demonstrating around those houses? In other words, what we need is a good, enabling environment for all of us, those in power and those outside power. It cannot be them and us. It should be us as Kenyans building up a society that we can all be comfortable to live in. Uhuru Kenyatta was president. He is today a civilian. The other day you saw, they tried to violate his right to property. They went and cannibalized his farm and so on. Now, is that what you want to do? No, nobody wants, because I was in leadership today, to be punished or to be invaded or to be violated because I'm out of government. So we don't want that. And so if a government is doing that and your reading is right, it is kicking in repression as if they will be around forever. No, they are not going to be around forever. Whether it's 2 term or 1 term, they'll come to end. And when they come to end, they'll still belong to this country. So we better learn how to live with each other, not how to fight each other.
And if you read this bill, in essence, if you look at what the Constitution currently provides under Article 37, the notification is given. Police are mandated to provide security. Now, you look at what is being proposed in terms of Kenyans should not go to these facilities, Parliament, State House, and one would read deeper and say, does it mean that the police are unable to provide security as mandated by Article 37 of the Constitution? And if that's the case, then why are we not making sure that police are able to perform their duties?
Okay, let me be very bold on this. We are looking for an excuse to shoot and kill. We are looking for an excuse to violate people's rights. We are now saying that because the law has been very tough, every time we have killed, there have been issues and we have suffered.
Yeah.
That's what we are hearing. Because now you're saying, they crossed this line. No. Every life, every Kenyan life, every life in Kenya is important, sacrosanct. Let's protect it. And by the way, as you say, the business of police to provide security. That's all. Not to come with guns. And by the way, if people are demonstrating without stones, without weapons, why do you need to guard them or to protect them with guns, tear gas, and all this arsenal? You don't need to. If people are protesting, what's the role of the police? Protect them from goons or any infiltration that will worsen the situation. When people are protesting, the role of the police is protect property, protect buildings, so that no goon or no criminal takes advantage of the protestations and uses violence.
So, Wakili, because here we are, and that there's a lot of conflation that's happening around all of this. That there were protests that took place. Yes, there were groups of people across the Kenyan spectrum who came out to do two things. Number one, to memorialize those who lost their lives during the last protest, and also to continue to demand for certain things, an end to this brutality and violence, an end to extrajudicial killings and all of these forced disappearances. There was the infiltration of these protests by these goons that we keep talking about, the criminals who came in to destroy property, to injure and violate others. So there was that infiltration. Whether or not they're going to acknowledge it, it did happen. Then nobody got to Parliament in this last because it was barricaded. Nobody got to State House because I don't even think anybody had an intent to, really. But it was just to keep that voice very clear. So when we see the destruction of property, which for me is a huge thing here, that there are innocent individuals who continue to go about their business, to ply their trade, who then were affected by the infiltration of criminals. Shouldn't we then see that a respectable government would say, we must then have a bill that requires protection for people who still operate in the city when peaceful protests by dint of the constitutional freedoms, that this might happen because of this infiltration? Shouldn't the protection be for the people as opposed to the minority of people who are inside these institutions?
Absolutely. Basically, what you're saying, Ndu, is that as long as demonstrations are peaceful, and as long as notification has been made, and the intentions to demonstrate have been made very clear, it's the business of security to provide what it takes to ensure that first of all, those who are demonstrating are not violated. Two, no property or no one with an ill intention takes advantage of the situation and then loots and does whatever. The key point for us is that we all have to be law-abiding. We must all live by the rule of law. This morning you've been discussing about how you would be, the other day, by the way, we saw in the late Ojwang's case, we know who picked him, we know who checked him in, and we know that he died in the hands of the police. How you turn around and begin to tell me you are investigating, you are still uncovering, I don't understand. But that is now a show that we do not respect the law by itself, that we don't even have regard to the law. So we don't need more laws because we will still not disregard it. You had the court orders are issued, and the police are the first to defy court orders. The government is the first to defy court orders. It means that we don't even need more laws. It means that we want to be lawless. Now, if we are lawless, the consequences are dire and real. It means every person for themselves. It means the state of nature. It means that life will be short, nasty, and brutish, as Thomas Hobbes once said. And that's where we all came from and said, no, we need governments and we need security apparatus to protect us from ourselves. So all the things are not meant for just the government, it's meant for us, the people, as well. So basically what we are saying is that as long as we are living on earth in this world and we need governments, the governments are supposed to be there to give us the necessary protection, services, and the infrastructure that we require to live, to go about our lives. So anything else is unnecessary. To keep on finding reason to repress, to oppress, and to jail Kenyans, what will happen? You can't jail all of them. Not even the colonialists managed it. Not even the first regime or the Moi regime or any other regime that was oppressive in the world managed to jail everybody. Dissent is fomented by more repression.
Yeah. So, Wakili, you read this bill and you look at the cabinet secretary has been given the mandate to put up zones where demonstrations can take place. And one would just ask the question, in a country where cabinet secretaries get orders from above, disregard the law, then who exactly is protecting even the law that is in place if we know cabinet secretaries are yes men?
You know, in this country and with the constitution, the government or the executive is run by the government, by the presidency. So forget about cabinet secretaries. Yeah. Those are on the beck and call of the president. They are not their own persons. They are appointed. They are not like that time when they were elected and then appointed into cabinet. So they are not. So yeah, right. They are my appointees. You'll do what I tell you to do. So that's a fact. So whatever you're seeing is being said is give power back to the executive, give it back to the president to do whatever he pleases. Now that doesn't help us. We need to demarcate between. You see, government is three structures, or rather, is three branches. There's the executive, judiciary, and the legislature. Each of those together form government. So the national government, the executive, ought to have checks inside itself. Parliament itself ought to have checks inside itself. So does judiciary have to have checks inside themselves. Now, to the extent that the executive is battling with the legislature or the legislature is battling with the judiciary, there might be reason enough to say those tensions are necessary. But each of them has a mandate that they must execute without fear or favor.
So let me play devil's advocate for a minute, shall
Yes.
Or maybe just even apply some sense and to see maybe where this is coming from. That let's assume that it's coming from a place of actually protection for the people, and that to stop 1 million people getting into, let's take Nairobi for example, or even 1 million people getting into Mombasa or Eldoret, that the police service, even with all its different arms, whether you want to talk about administration police, if you want to talk about throw in NYS, throw in whomever you want to, are not going to be able to provide adequate protection for 1 million people in the city. So the only way to then assure that citizenry is protected during something like this is to restrict them to certain areas. I'm even laughing as I say.
I know you cannot even believe your own voice, but yeah, fine, I'm listening.
So perhaps it is to say, if we know that you're restricted to certain areas, then we can guarantee your protection. And if you don't go all over the place running helter-skelter, then we can be sure that you're okay here.
That may be the case, but that's not how demonstrations work. You do not demonstrate. You see, if you say that, they'll tell you, you want to demonstrate? We are taking you to Kasarani.
You demonstrate over there. Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is that you want to make it known that you have issues around where the issue is, where the matter is. So, for example, and I want to take the idea that you want to protect people. That's fine. If I give a notice that I want to protest around Harambee Avenue, and I'll come with 1 million people, just advise those who have business around that avenue on that day to keep their shops locked and offices locked. They are fewer than the 1 million that I'm going to come with. So it's easier actually to protect those fewer than to say that you want to stop the majority from coming in. And I don't know that I know you know. When a river is flowing, it does not matter what you do to it. You can turn it here, you can block it here, but it will always look for its flow. Demonstrations are, in that respect, they take on a life of their own, and they'll move. And you've seen it, that even when you cordon off here, people are still finding a way out here and so on. Basically, what we are saying is that it is freedom that we are trying to curtail. Freedom of movement, freedom of expression. But all we are also urging is that all the government needs to do is get this in an orderly fashion. Once you've declared that there's a demonstration, just take care of the security of those installations or those areas that you believe should be protected. But as again I've said, even Parliament is not a sacrosanct place. It's a people's house. And so what we do is just let's ask for respect. I mean, people can demonstrate. The only thing is do not destroy property, do not breach, do not violate, do not cause crimes, do not engage in criminal activities. That's not the message. I mean, I should not beat people on the way. That's not demonstration. I should not destroy people's property. That's not demonstration. But do I have a right to protest, a right to go on hunger strike, a right to sit in a place and be a nuisance? Do I have a right to be a nuisance? Yes. As long as I'm not being offensive, I'm not committing a crime.
All right.
Guys, if you look at the provisions of this bill, what is of concern, besides, the amounts that you will pay or the jail time that you'll face, is the new paperwork besides the cost.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at the key provisions and a couple of things that have been added here. So under this current bill, you will notify the officers 3 to 14 days. So 3 to 14 days ahead. But you must file extra details, hire marshals, buy liability insurance, and accept that you pay for anything broken. The current act only asks you to notify and keep and help keep order. That's all. Number 2, there's a wider police discretion here that has been added. So today, police must point to a clear and imminent threat before stopping a march. The 2024 bill lets the regulating officer, in quotes, rewrite or postpone or cancel a protest on their own assessment. While the 2025 amendment lets the interior CS draw red lines on a map that are totally off limits. Now, when you look at these red zones, Section 5B carves out a 100-meter exclusion belt around Parliament, around State House, and courts and other, in quotes, protected areas. Any picket inside that belt becomes a criminal offense. So the organizer on the hook here, if a rogue infiltrator smashes a window, the 2024 bill makes the organizer liable for the bill. Potentially millions, regardless of fault. So when you look at these higher fines, I took time to look at what the other countries have done, because prohibitions on participants here, no one may, at a protest, incite hatred or violence, utter words likely to cause or encourage violence, wear masks or disguises or security force style uniforms. So they're saying you can't wear a mask when you go to a protest or cover yourself.
Okay.
You cannot carry offensive weapons. Now, when you look at the countries, I was just looking at where are they borrowing this thing from, and I quickly made comparisons. Uganda Public Order Management Act, POMA, requires organizers to notify police of any public meeting or demonstrations and gives police broader powers. You look at Zimbabwe, the Maintenance of Peace and Order Act, they actually say you give a 7-day written notice to police, mandatory for any public procession or demonstration, and then police commanders may order preventive detention of organizers who defy the ban. You see where we're borrowing these things from? We go to Ethiopia, still the core national law in Ethiopia, organizers must give 48 hours notice and cannot assemble within 100 meters of embassies, of churches, markets, or within 500 meters of military security premises. In South Africa, the regulation is 500 meters of schools or childcare centers unless special permission is granted. So this belt we're creating, we are trying to borrow what else is happening elsewhere in the continent, and we are then saying we are going to use this belt to cover State House, to cover Parliament, and to cover the courts.
And I would have no problem with those belts being created. What I'm concerned about is that we cannot use excuses or some of these not necessarily constitutional, arguments to kill, to maim, and to abduct. Because see, what we are preparing ourselves for is repression. So we want more law to enable us to oppress, to suppress. We just need a conversation with Kenyans. Remember, what people are demonstrating about are issues.
Yeah.
Why don't we address the issues? And then we do not have a law to protect ourselves from some of these things. So, yes, and we are borrowing them, and our intentions are what I said. What is the mischief here? It's simply to make it impossible for any Kenyan to exercise their right. Now, whatever you say there are issues that you've raised there that are unconstitutional. And whether the law passes today or tomorrow, the courts exercising their discretion and their interpretation of the Constitution will still find some of these things offensive. Because how do you pass on the burden of security to me as an organizer of a demonstration when that is a government responsibility and there is security in Kenya or security police and other apparatus? So basically there are things there that are rather awkward. They are totally unacceptable.
Okay, if we say if it is law and working in some other jurisdictions, the reasoning behind it, and is there a middle ground that you can actually find? Because if we're talking about practicing democracy, these are some of the tenets of democracy, and that's how it's lived out. How do you make sure that happens? We're looking into this, what is already being called controversial bill. If we do a bit of a comparison between other nations on the continent, whereby we can draw these parallels, and we look at what has happened before that. If we look at South Africa, for example, still, when we look at world orders or nations, still very young, coming out of apartheid, which essentially came to end in 1991, and that there were all the time in the big cities, in Johannesburg, Pretoria, all over the place, Durban, that folks would come out and they would say, look, we are practicing our right to actually come out and speak, and it was against a particular regime that had took place for the longest time. For them to protect some of these institutions, which we see now playing out in this bill now, would it be wrong of governments to say, okay, we can understand that. We want to be within the democratic right to protest, but at the same time, there are some institutions that we should protect. If we look at Uganda, we see the same thing happening, whereby almost walking down the street in some cases was a crime. Wanting to protect those institutions. Where do they draw all of this from?
You see, it's okay. I mean, and let's also accept that maybe there have been a few overreaches. Running over a police station, taking guns, burning a police station, or running over a court, a courtroom, and violating it is not excusable. It is really out of bounds. That's criminal. So we must accept that they have some, and let's deal with the crime. Let's say we know, Dennis, this is what you've done, and this is a crime. To burn arson is a crime. Everything that we are talking about already is a crime. To go to a military station, barracks or whatever it is, with an intention to invade it, would amount to a violation. So there are things that already are unlawful. If I went to Parliament and I was peaceful and I was standing there, and the only thing maybe I'm doing is obstructing parliamentarians from coming out or going in, but they are also walking under the tunnel, there's nothing I'm committing there. There's no violation there. So to go to State House and just demonstrate outside the gate is okay. Not touch, not destroy anything. So basically what we are saying is that we shouldn't be fearing. We should not be scaring or be scared of ourselves from ourselves. All we should be asking ourselves is, look, you have a right, do it, but do it without violating other rights. That's all we should be saying. And the Constitution says so, and we also know. I mean, you are here, you have a job to do. I can't come here with a rungu and start, chasing you around. I know that that's violating, that's going beyond my limit. So we have to come to that understanding. And yes, there's some necessary element of protection, and that's why police guard banks or central bank or whatever it is. Because if you don't do that, People will come in the name of peaceful demonstration only to invade it and only to commit a burglary. No problem. All we want to say is that we have enough laws, enough rules and regulations. We don't need more and more. Remember, we've come from far. Yeah. We've come from the days of single party. We have now multi-party. We have enough political parties, for example, so we don't even need another law against it or for it. So we have enough freedom. We have enough provisions. We don't need more.
Wakili, you look at this law, and one thing that comes out is in the current Article 37, all I need to do is notify you. Yeah. I do not need permission. But you look at what is being proposed is, I would need permission from a cabinet secretary who would then say, go here. If they feel as though this is not safe, they would actually say no to it. But you look at these and put it together with the training of police officers, because you look at demonstrations that we have every other day, and police come to fight. They don't come to provide security, they come to fight, and comes in with the training of police officers in terms of making sure that they are ready to handle protests, not to fight with the protest. And one would ask the question, how do we then get the balance that the government does not come to fight? They address what is fundamental in terms of, let us equip our police officers in terms of training so that they're able to handle these protesters well as ensuring that the rights that are in the Constitution are actually followed to the T. Should that be the route that we are following?
And you're right. In fact, I'm smiling because the approach of our police, the approach of the executive, the approach of the president and his cabinet, is that every time there are demonstrations, they want to overthrow the government. That's the approach. Therefore, you block the road to State House, you block this, you fight, you bring up tear gas, you bring up water cannons. That's the approach. And maybe they have something to fear about. Maybe they have something to fear about. But the intention really is that the demonstrators are expressing themselves. They are saying it loudly that they are unhappy about one or two things. So the solution then is, if you are in the government, is fix that is broken. And nobody will come to demonstrate against you. And nobody's interested in removing the president from office. They are simply asking the president, be accountable while in the office, or fulfill your promises. Now, if you don't want to fulfill the promises, tell Kenyans, come out and tell them, no, even if you shout, I will not, because I've since changed my mind. And that's fine. They'll wait for you in 5 years. They'll do an election, and that's not a problem. So there is a place where we must accept. Kenyans have given you power. Kenyans are free to express themselves. Whether they like you or not, they're free to say. And you too you have freedom. You can talk. You can say, look, guys, you've given me power. Wait for 5 years. You can remove me if you want. But for now, I'm busy. And if you're doing things that make sense to them, they will come back and say, yeah. We didn't think we were right. But if you don't make sense to them, they will exercise their right to vote you out.
Maybe we need some help sometimes. Usually, that when we're being taught, in school, at the very primary level of school, even way up to universities, even at the master's, PhD level, that you sometimes need an example. That the theory is taught, we read it from the books, but then usually we will do a case study at some point. We'll be given an example of this thing that has been taught in theory, right?
Yes.
So what are examples of nations that are living out a democracy where the people are able to live or operate under the auspices of their supreme law while keeping the rule of law, and while government also is able to keep things within the lines? Can these things all exist in the same space?
Absolutely.
And if they can, where on this earth is it happening?
I don't even want to go far. I want to use Kenya.
Okay.
Remember that during Kenyatta's time, the constitution was changed several times. Now, the reasons behind the change of the constitution, according to Kenyatta and his cronies at that time, was he needed more certainty and more power to rule. And so his intentions were that if I remove this multi-party thing, if I kill this Majimbo thing, I'll rule better. Now, you can see the logic behind it. Did that stop Kenyans from pushing for a new constitution? No. They kept on pushing. They kept on saying, no. We don't want this, we don't want this. Enter Moi. fairly repressive. He is told that, Kenya is a multi-party state. Says, no. Change it. Change section 2. Put in section 2A, one-party state. Agitations come. He says, okay, let's remove it. Again, you can see that whenever people are expressing themselves, leaders respond positively or sometimes not the way they want, but they respond. Look at IPPG. IPPG was a negotiated space to buy more time. So he had 10 years.
Yeah.
And after that, multi-party kicked in and his term ended. And he actually left. Remember, he gave us Uhuru against, everybody's expectation. We voted the way we voted. And he accepted our results. Again, that's the rule of law. You have, their term has expired. You have tried to influence transition, and it has not happened. Look at Uhuru. Uhuru had an opportunity to install Raila as his successor. He tried everything. It didn't work. He didn't refuse. He agreed. He went, and Raila did not go to Bondo, but hung around. So the point I'm making is that every time Kenyans have expressed themselves, there have been movements, sometimes positive movements. When we didn't like the constitution, we were able not to agree in 2005, but eventually in 2010 we agreed on this constitution.
And how can that happen today, where there seems to be so much public furore, and folks are asking the question, then how do we get out of this space where it seems to be so difficult at the moment?
Kenyans are not asking for anything new. They are saying, be accountable to our constitution. They are saying Article 10 gives us principles and values we should live by. They are saying, those of you in leadership, be accountable. The solution is those in leadership should be accountable. Is there an opportunity for those who are seeing them not accountable to act? Yes. An election is coming. Of course, that is also another issue because we don't know whether we have an IBC, it has not been sworn in, and so on. That is another one. But certainly we have a mechanism in our constitution that says elections be held every 5 years. So there is a way in which, even if we don't like what is happening now, we can wait and express that during the... But that doesn't mean we cannot demonstrate. We should. That doesn't mean that we cannot speak. We should. But the government also should know that it has a time within which to deliver or not. Now it is past half term. It's past half term. Now, after half term, it is now having to address issues of re-election. There are many people who have offered themselves, including one guest that we'll have later. And that is their right. Because they believe maybe they have what it takes to be leaders, and therefore they can come and express themselves. So basically what I'm saying is that there is nothing wrong with the current constitution. There is everything wrong about our intention not to want to have dialogue, not to want to speak to each other, or to take each other for granted. And that's what is causing more dissent.
So, Kelly, so far, the Public Order Amendment Bill 2025, sponsored by Esther Passaris, is already in motion. Now, the bill is going to be scrutinized by the Narok West MP Gabriel Tongoyo-led committee, which has powers then to accept the proposed changes and take the views of other agencies before doing a report to the House for consideration during the second reading. Is there recourse for Kenyans? Can somebody then go to court to stop this? They are doing this, and they will still push this by the look of things, because of the numbers that they have in the National Assembly. Chances are they will push for this. But where do Kenyans stand? What can we do, or what can people do?
In a democracy, what Kenyans should do is to reach out to their members of parliament and to express their displeasure with these amendments. And what will those members of parliament be expected to do? They'll be expected to vote against it. And Kenyans who do not like what their members of parliament will do, if they vote for this, they have a reason to vote them out when the time comes. They can say, we voted this way, we didn't like it. So there's that avenue, is a democratic avenue. But the other democracy is that allow the National Assembly to go through the motions. Let them pass it and let the president assent to it. Then we will go to court and say, portions of this law are unconstitutional. And the courts have time without number made that statement, that this provision violates this constitution. For example, the constitution says notify. This law is saying seek permission. Now, that is a violation of that. Yeah, and in this case, the constitution is more superior than the law you pass. And therefore, if you make that argument, the courts are likely to agree with you and say that provision requiring the police to give permission or counsel is unconstitutional. So there is a process we must go through in a democracy, in the rule of law, and we should follow all those things.
But if the president signs it into law and this issue is taken to court, will it then be suspended pending the courts?
Now, those are all avenues that you can canvass. Can the courts do that? Yes, they have suspended the law and said until this and this is decided. Will they say, okay, let's go through the end, the law is already in place, do not implement it, or whatever you pray for if you're going to court is likely to be given or is likely to be a process. But at the end of it all, the question was as to whether there are some unconstitutional provisions in that law will be a question at the High Court, will be a question of the Court of Appeal, and will be a question at the Supreme Court. Now I'm talking about the rule of law. I'm talking about how we need to progress if the president assents to it. But I'm also thinking that there are enough reasonable Kenyans in the National Assembly who are listening to us now or even through the newspapers who will say, no, let us expunge those provisions that will be problematic to the extent that they can do that, and they can actually make those amendments and pass something that maybe we can live with. Essentially, what we are saying is that we know what the intentions are, but to the extent that it will violate the Constitution, there is room for that to be fixed. And if it's not fixed, there is room for that to be litigated. And it's a litigation process that must end, if necessary, at the Supreme Court.
But Okili, if you look at let's talk about demonstrations. Whenever they're called for, it is for a certain purpose. There's something that is being pushed. But what is not being addressed is the issues and concerns Kenyans are following. You reckon that perhaps if Kenyans were heard, there would be no need for all these laws?
Just like in your home, if you run your home well, you will never know whether there are problems there. But if you run it badly, your children will be in court. They'll take, they'll be all over the place. So Kenya is a good place, and let's all enjoy being in it. Yeah. But again, if we are in the leadership, let us do that Kenyans expect of us. And you can't fight against or fight with Kenyans. You must only listen to them. That's what I would say.
Wakili Dr. Martins Oloo, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.